Hi, Kyle. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. You've got a really interesting story about how you got into working with people around conflict. And I'm curious if you would tell our audience a little bit about how you got into this and why it's so interesting to you.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of kind of why I got into the field of working with couples around their relationship issues is because I had a lot of relationship issues where I just felt really insecure, and that manifested in being betrayed and other things that kind of happened in my relationships. And so, what ended up happening is as I went from relationship after relationship that was really unhealthy for me, my body ended up feeling all the stress of that,
Mm.
ended up getting a big autoimmune reaction called psoriasis that covered me from head to toe. Never had it before. And it literally just shut me down for quite a while. Um, and I remember being sick and thinking, how in the world did I get here?
Yeah.
And what really stood out to me was my relationships. They just were so anxiety provoking. I can remember feeling just anxious and insecure all over my chest in particular. And when I was sick, I picked up the book Attached by Amir Levine and Rachel Heller, which talks a lot about attachment theory.
I love
And
that
then
book. I've
it is
recommended that book so much to people.
Yeah, it's a wonderful book.
Yeah.
And then I picked up the book What Makes Love Last by Dr. John Gottman
Mhm.
and Nan Silver. And then I started to write about that just because I was like, where's my part in this? What role did I play? And that just really led me on a journey to understand what makes relationship works, why they struggle. And that led me to writing for the Gottman Institute, writing a bunch of blogs for them. Currently, actually, I manage the research studies for them,
Nice.
and then have been helping couples work on their communication, work on what goes on underneath the conflict that they don't talk about, that keeps them from being really stuck, which is kind of what we get to talk about today.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's such an important topic. I
Mhm.
think a lot of times we talk just about self-love and intimacy and how to be more intimate, but then we're always going to have a conflict because
Mhm.
we're different people and we need to know how to manage that in a way that's healthy and constructive.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
that's one of the things a lot of people don't, I get some people like, okay, we'll just get rid of all our conflict. And the reality is that's never going to happen. And that's one of the things, just as you said, manage conflict. That's what the research shows is 69% of a relationship, the conflict, 69% of the time will be unsolvable. But that
Yeah.
doesn't mean a relationship can't thrive. And that's where we get to focus today.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so does that mean that if it's not solvable, so
Mhm.
you're going to have this like repeated um, area
Right.
where you don't agree. Does
Mhm.
that mean you sort of agree to disagree?
Sometimes, sometimes not. So, kind of where this comes from, we'll nerd out for a second and then come back to it.
Yeah.
Gottman, John Gottman, who I really adore, has done research for 40 plus years on thousands of couples. He also does it now with his wife. They're amazing. But he would have couples come to the lab, hook them up on wires, measure kind of their heartbeat. They'd have this thing called a jiggle meter, which measure how much they would move in the seat, all this stuff. Um, and what he found is he'd have couples come in, they'd have a conflict conversation, they'd come back 4 years later, they'd come back another 4 years later. It was as if only 4 minutes had passed. Same conversation, almost the same way of communicating. Um, Maybe a little more escalated for some couples, maybe a little less escalated and more shut down, or and so that's kind of what he noticed. And what he found is that couples who are able to dialogue about their differences are able to kind of look at it as like almost like a bad knee. Okay, this is
Mm,
something we just have to live with.
yeah.
Sometimes it's a disagreeing. Sometimes there's actually a nice happy medium that the couple can build a bridge to, that honors both of them. And often underneath those conflicts that couples feel like they're butting heads, John and Julie Gottman say there's a dream there. There's a hidden longing that really needs to be expressed in a really vulnerable way. And when I've worked with couples and they're able to get to that deeper longing and what the meaning is for them, both partners tend to soften, and then we're able to start to compromise and problem solve of, okay, what does this look like? Are we going to do this for a few years? What about this part? And we start to brainstorm. But often the reason they're like this is because they don't actually understand or fully deeply connect with why it's so deeply important to their partner. So
So I wanted to talk to you about why, kind of what blocks couples from working through their conflict. Is that a part of it? This problem with,
that is definitely a part of it. A lot of it is really kind of how couples have conflict. And so there's another famous psychologist who passed not too long ago named Dan Weil.
Mhm.
And he talked about with every relationship problem, there's actually two problems. There's the actual issue, and then there's how couples communicate about the issue. And often the problem in all relationships is not so much the issue, it's how they're talking about it. And that's where John's research and some of the stuff John and Julie have done really brings to light how we communicate makes a big difference. And so, for example, if we start a conversation off pretty negatively, if I go to my partner and say, "You never clean the dishwasher, you're such a slop," like, and that conversation continues for a few minutes, there's a 96% chance that conversation is going to end negative.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just
Right.
my partner is just going to hear a personal attack.
Yeah.
Right. And yet that is what blocks couples is when we start with an attack, we don't actually hear, "Hey, I really need help. I'm really stressed out. I'm overwhelmed. Can you please help me? I need you." That doesn't get heard. Instead, we get heard, "I'm lazy. I never do this, even though I did it 2 weeks ago." Right. And like, and then all of a sudden we're fighting about whether we did the dishwasher and kind of doing a scorecard
Mhm.
conflict. What's actually underneath that is actually talking about, right, I'm feeling really lonely or I'm feeling really overwhelmed. And that doesn't get tended to because we're so focused on the topic of the dishwasher as an example. Does that make sense?
That makes sense to me. To me, it always feels like when I talk to people about that dynamic is like I have this need and I'm upset at you for not knowing that I need that. It it
Mhm.
it, it feels like I'm expecting my partner to read my mind.
It definitely is. And sometimes even that reading, sometimes we'll even think we're being very clear with our partners, but we're a little bit guarded,
Yeah.
right? When we
Yeah.
talk to our partner. And when I'm working with couples, one of the things we'll talk about is, okay, is your guard in the room right now? Are you feeling kind of protected? Because when we're feeling protected, we're not really vulnerable and saying, "I'm really scared right now. I really need you." It's more of, "Yeah, you don't do the dishes. I can't rely on you. You're an unreliable partner."
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Which is poke, 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 poke,
Right,
poke,
right. Right.
not see how scared I am, how vulnerable I am, how much I actually need you. Um,
Do you
so yeah.
notice that if partners, if the person who's feeling scared or overwhelmed is able to say that they mostly get a good response from their partner? I feel like that's where we're scared. We don't want to say
It
that.
it it can significantly help, especially if they're able to own what's going on for them and share from a really vulnerable place of, "Hey, I'm just so stressed out with what's going on in our life. I know the dishwasher is something that I always pick on. It's just something that helps me feel more safe and secure in the home when everything else in my life is chaos.
Yeah.
Can you help me here, please?" Right? That detail and that level of vulnerability, the partner's like, "Sure."
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And they move closer. And that's when I'm working with couples, it's working with them becoming vulnerable, then moving those kind of blocks to the side to be able to share their heart with their partner. And when their partner hears their heart, often their response in our sessions is, "Of course, let me come closer." Sometimes it's not. There's a little bit more stuff, blocks there that we got to work on that other partner. But when they hear it in a softer way of what their partner needs, and then the partner needs their support, needs their comfort, it's very typical for the partner to really lean in and want to
Hmm.
be there.
Hmm.
Right. To
Right.
be needed by someone you love and care about is really meaningful. And so
Yes.
often people will show up in that way.
Yeah. I feel like we often get into this mode of believing that our partners are upsetting us on purpose or ignoring us on purpose. They're doing it even though they know that it
Mhm,
upsets us. And
mhm,
why would that be that you
mhm.
love this person? Why would you want to hurt them and ignore them purposefully.
Right. Well, and that's again, that's a protection, right? If my partner is really manipulative, my partner is controlling. I mean, there are partners like that, but often that's not the case in relationships. And the reason we want to believe that or want to convince ourselves that's the case is then we get to be guarded and protected,
Yeah.
right? And we
Yeah.
get to kind of poke at our partner rather than kind of own that I'm really scared that I don't matter to you.
Yeah.
I'm scared that I'm not important, right?
Yeah.
That's a very different approach than the kind of you never care about me, you, right? Very, very pokey in that way.
So I'm guessing that sometimes the small issues like, well, the dishwasher isn't like, it seems like a small issue,
Mhm.
but really what's underneath that is I'm feeling overwhelmed, and that's kind of a big issue.
Mhm.
Is that why these small little things seemingly just blow up? I don't know. I'm sure you've been in
Yeah.
an argument where
Yeah.
it's just a little thing. It's like, why are we even having this argument? Yeah.
Yeah. One of the examples I talk about that's on my blog as well as the Gottman Institute's blog is my wife and I had a fight over cat litter.
Oh,
And
uh-huh.
so I can't remember exactly the details now, but like I didn't put enough cat litter in the litter box, and my wife's leaving for work, and she was pissed. She was pissed that I didn't put enough cat litter, and so she's poking at me about the cat litter. I'm being defensive and saying I filled up the cat litter. The cat's fine. You're being dramatic, and all of a sudden we're in a big conflict. And then she came back later that day, and we sat down and go, what happened?
Yeah, right.
And we're able to process it. And what it came to is that cat was what we had known was dying, was getting skinnier and skinnier, was not able to hold food down, and that was her first cat.
Oh,
And so for her, it was like, I'm losing Rexy, I'm losing this cat who's so important to me, and my partner doesn't even care, right? And so that's where she went. And when I was able to understand that and go, wow, like I do know what's going on with Rexy. I know how hard this is for you. It makes so much sense why you were so upset.
yeah.
She was able to soften and then go, yeah, and I also know you would never do something intentionally to neglect our cat in any way or do anything like that. And so all of a sudden we were able to resolve it because we were able to process it. But from cat litter to toothpaste to
Right.
lint rollers to leaving a door open, all these things underneath them, there's something really deeply emotional and symbolic about it.
Mm,
And what blocks couples from getting to that is they often talk about the surface stuff and they start to debate with one another about, the cat litter or the laundry or who's picking the kids up, not about I need you or I'm overwhelmed or I'm scared or I'm hurting.
yeah.
Right.
So if you're able to check in with yourself and realize that the reason you're having a reaction is
Mhm,
probably because of some emotional issue
mhm.
you're dealing with, bringing that, excuse me, bringing that in instead of why didn't you do this the way I need you to do it? Why are you so fill in the blank?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and that's and in Gottman world, they talk about kind of a soft startup, right? I talked about that harsh startup,
Yeah.
right? You never do the dishwasher, you're so sloppy. That's a harsh startup. Partner's almost always going to be defensive to that. The soft startup is I feel whatever the feeling is, not a I feel that or I feel you should. Those are not feelings, an actual feeling. I feel sad, I feel overwhelmed, I feel frustrated, I feel stuck um about whatever the situation is, and what I really need is this, right?
Mm,
So if we flip that dishwasher instance around, right? I feel really overwhelmed about what's going on in our lives right now.
mhm.
Um, and I really need help with the house. Can you do the dishwasher, please?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. I like that. So, do you have any other practical tools that couples could use?
Yeah, I think that's a big one because we know, again, how we start a conversation 96% of the time predicts how the conversation ends.
Mhm.
So that's kind of a soft startup that is going to be really influential in how we engage in the conversation. The other thing that's going to be important is if we're doing a soft startup, the other partner needs to work on how to listen without needing to react or respond right away,
Okay.
needing
Okay.
to listen. And so one of the things that from the Gottman method that we work on is one of the partner will speak about what their experience is, really focus only on them, not on what their partner is doing, but on what they notice and how that impacts them.
Mhm.
Then their partner who's listening really sits with that and is able to kind of share back, okay, what I hear you saying is this, right? I hear you saying that you're overwhelmed with everything going on in life and you really need me to help with the dishwasher. Did I get that right? Yes. Okay. Is there anything else? Actually, yeah, I'm even more stressed about this part and this part. Okay. And they reflect that back. And so it's kind of this making sure that you're really understanding your partner. And then, and once you get that, you add the empathy part. Like it makes so much sense why you were so overwhelmed with this because we got this going on with the kids. This is going on with the house. Like, of course, I get it. Right. That partner then softens. And
Mhm.
then you switch roles and the goal is for both partners to feel really understood. And then when they feel understood, that's where we can start to problem solve. And
Yeah.
so that's what Gottman calls that's the Gottman rap report.
Okay.
Um, which is something, right? There's a speaker, there's a listener, and there's certain ways of talking that actually make the conversation so much more productive.
How hard is it to learn all that?
It definitely takes some time,
Uh-huh.
right? For a lot of us, it's foreign. It's a little weird to start to talk like that.
Mhm.
Um, and it's not necessarily that you're going to talk like that the rest of your marriage, but what it does is it slows you down to be more vulnerable, to make sure you get heard, to make sure your partner hears you. And that then starts to change the conflict in the relationship for the long term. And so initially, it feels really awkward. It feels clunky.
Yeah, I bet it
Uh,
does.
right? It's just
Yeah.
like riding a bicycle. It's just like anything. It doesn't feel so great right away. But if you're willing to take a detour and do something different than what you have been doing that's causing you to be stuck, then there can be an opportunity to build a new type of connection, a new way to navigate conflict that can build a bridge between the two of you and bring you closer.
So then we circle back around to what you mentioned at the beginning, which is the two of you have gotten into a dialogue about
Mhm.
the conflict. And if this is a common argument, then there might be this dream underneath this
Mhm.
bigger emotional issue
Right.
that you're really having a problem with,
Right.
not,
Exactly. And then
not the two.
that can right, exactly, and then that gets to come to the surface,
Mhm,
right? Of
mhm.
like, you know what, I grew up in a house that was pure chaos, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, yeah, the toothpaste, even though that might seem insignificant to you, that becomes a trigger of, oh my gosh, I'm back in that chaotic world, and my nervous system automatically reacts. And
Mhm,
what the
mhm.
partner gets to understand of, I have a, when I was growing up, I had this dream of having a clean home that was
Yeah.
really organized. So I would feel safe and I would dream about that to feel safe in the moment because I couldn't control what was going on in my world.
Yeah.
And the partner goes, whoa, wow, thank you
Yeah.
for sharing that. Like let's team up. It might not be perfect, but let's work on this a little bit.
Right.
Right. And then there's room for both partners to navigate. Okay, maybe the toothpaste cap doesn't go on all the time, but but maybe something else is picked up, right? They start to actually dialogue about what are the things they really will can agree to work on that will move the relationship forward and create a sense of safety for that partner.
Yeah. Yeah, and I could see where a sense of safety really gives each other room to express the vulnerability. It's like this nice positive feedback cycle once it gets going, where you can really start to develop that deeper intimacy with your partner and kind of know, like, so if they do explode over the toothpaste cap, you kind of know it's not about you actually leaving the cap off. There's something deeper going on there. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And that's one of the other things. I mean, if we were to pull up what John and Julie created, the Sound Relationship House, we talk about this positive perspective versus negative perspective. When we have this healthy conflict that we're able to manage well, we have a good emotional bond, we have what is called a positive perspective. So when our partner does blow up about the toothpaste, instead of going, oh my gosh, they're such a horrible partner, they're always angry, they're always critical, they're always this way, our first thought is, what's going on with you today?
Yeah. Yeah.
Why is this toothpaste such a big issue right now?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then all of a sudden the partner goes, oh, what's actually going on is this, and all of a sudden we have a totally different conversation that brings us closer.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. I always like that kind of middle way, so to speak. So there's the getting angry, there's the withdrawing. After a while, if you fought about it a number of times, eventually you can just shut it off and not fight, but that's not really the solution either. We need to be able to talk about it, which is that middle way.
Right. Which is that engaged. And that's the part, is like both the getting angry or the shutting down, those are guarded, those are protected. Right. And the more protected we get, the farther we get from being close and connected. The more often we have conflicts where we're more protected, the more they get escalated, and we just go around and around. But if we can soften and we can be vulnerable, we can hear each other, that protection gets smaller, our love for one another gets louder, and all of a sudden we're a team again who actually can navigate the challenge together, which is ultimately what couples want. Yeah.
It's what I was going to say. It's what we want.
Right. Exactly.
That's ultimately what we want. Yeah. Well, this has been an awesome conversation. A lot of really good information here. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Of course.
How can people, yeah, sorry, I interrupted you.
All good.
How can people find you?
Yeah, people can find some of the content I write at kylebenson.net.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much.